The year was 1945. The world was emerging from the darkest chapter in modern history. The echoes of war still reverberated through the streets, and the scars it left were fresh and deep. World War II, a storm that had consumed the globe, was finally waning. The end of the war brought a wave of relief, a collective exhale from the world's weary lungs. Celebrations erupted in cities and towns as people dared to hope for a brighter future. A collective sigh of relief swept across nations, a yearning for peace palpable in the air. Soldiers returned home to tearful reunions, and families were whole again. The joy was infectious, spreading like wildfire through communities. But in the quiet town of Harmony Creek, nestled amidst the sprawling cornfields of Indiana, a different kind of storm was brewing. This town, seemingly untouched by the chaos of the outside world, was about to face its own battle. A darkness descended upon Harmony Creek, a chill that had nothing to do with the coming winter. The air grew heavy with an unspoken dread, and the once vibrant community began to feel the weight of an invisible burden. Harmony Creek was the kind of place where time seemed to amble at a slower pace. Life was simple, predictable, and the days flowed like the gentle river that wound its way through the town. Neighbors knew each other by name, children roamed free, and doors were often left unlocked. It was a place where trust was the currency of daily life, and everyone felt a sense of belonging. It was a picture of idyllic Americana, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had gripped the world just beyond its borders. The town's charm was its simplicity, a haven of normalcy in a world that had been anything but. But beneath the veneer of tranquility rippled through the community. Whispers of worry began to circulate, and the once tight-knit community started to fray at the edges. The war, though distant, had cast long shadows. The memories of loss and sacrifice were still fresh, and the impact of those years lingered in the hearts of the townsfolk. Rationing continued, and the men who had left to fight were yet to return, leaving a void in the heart of the town. Women who had taken on new roles during the war now faced an uncertain future. It was in this fragile peace, this moment of collective vulnerability, that the unthinkable happened. The town's sense of security was shattered, and fear took root in the hearts of its residents. 5 children vanished without a trace. The disappearance sent shockwaves through Harmony Creek, turning the town's quiet streets into a landscape of suspicion and sorrow. The search for answers would uncover secrets long buried, and the town would never be the same again. The day began like any other, the sun casting a warm golden glow on Harmony Creek. The town of Harmony was known for its serene mornings, where the first light of dawn would gently wake the residents, and the birds would sing their morning songs. The creek, with its clear, sparkling water, was a favorite spot for the children to play before heading to school. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the promise of a new day. Children, their laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air, made their way to the schoolhouse on Harmony Road. The schoolhouse, a small red brick building, stood at the end of the road, surrounded by tall oak trees. The children, dressed in their 1940s clothing, carried their books and lunch pails, chatting excitedly about the day's lessons and their plans for the afternoon. The road was alive with their energy, a daily parade of youthful exuberance. Among them were the 5 who would become forever etched in the town's memory: 10-year-old Sam Miller, leader of the pack. Sam was known for his adventurous spirit and his knack for getting into and out of trouble. He was the one who always had a plan, whether it was a new game to play or a secret hideout to explore. His friends looked up to him, and he took his role as their leader seriously. His shy 8-year-old sister Lily was the opposite of her brother, quiet and reserved. She preferred the company of her books to the rough-and-tumble games the boys played. But she adored her brother and followed him everywhere, her trust in him absolute. She had a gentle nature and a kind heart, always ready to help anyone in need. The mischievous twins, Billy and Bobby Campbell, aged 9. The twins were a handful, always up to some prank or another. They were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and sharing a bond that only twins could understand. Their laughter was infectious, and their antics often left the adults shaking their heads in exasperation. But they had hearts of gold and would do anything for their friends. And their quiet neighbor, 7-year-old Emily Carter. Emily was a sweet, gentle girl who loved animals and nature. She spent hours exploring the woods and fields around her home, often bringing back injured animals to nurse them back to health. She was a bit of a loner, but she cherished her friendship with the other children and looked forward to their daily walks to school. They were last seen by old Mrs. Hathaway, who lived in the small cottage at the edge of the woods bordering Harmony Road. Mrs. Hathaway was a fixture in the community, known for her wisdom and her stories of the old days. She had lived in Harmony all her life and had seen the town grow and change. Her cottage, with its ivy-covered walls and flower-filled garden, was a favourite stop for the children on their way to and from porch, watching the world go by, her faithful hound Buster by her side. Buster was a large, friendly dog who loved the children as much as they loved him. He would wag his tail and bark happily whenever they passed by, and they would stop to pet him and give him treats. Mrs. Hathaway would smile and wave, her heart warmed by their youthful energy. She'd wave to the children and they'd call out their greetings, their voices a familiar melody in her day. It was a routine that brought her great joy, a small but significant part of her daily life. She looked forward to their visits, their laughter and chatter a bright spot in her otherwise quiet days. But that day their cheerful good mornings faded into an unsettling silence. As the children walked away, disappearing down the road, Mrs. Hathaway felt a strange unease. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something felt off. She watched them until they were out of sight, a sense of foreboding settling in her heart. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, a sense of disquiet began to settle upon the town. The usual sounds of the day seemed muted, and an eerie stillness hung in the air. The townspeople went about their business, but there was an undercurrent of tension, a feeling that something was not right. The children had not returned from school. The schoolhouse, usually bustling with activity, was eerily quiet. The teachers and staff were puzzled and concerned, as it was unlike the children to be late. They waited, hoping the children would appear, but as the minutes turned into hours, their worry grew. Their absence, usually filled with the sounds of play and laughter, was now a deafening void. The playground, once alive with the shouts, now silent. The swings hung motionless, and the seesaws were still. The road where the children had walked that morning was empty, a stark contrast to the lively scene just hours before. Panic, like a brush fire, quickly spread through the community. Parents, teachers, and neighbors gathered, their faces etched with worry. The news of the missing children spread rapidly, and soon the entire town was in a state of alarm. The sense of community that had always been a source of strength now became a source of collective fear. Search parties were hastily assembled, their calls echoing through the growing darkness. Men and women, armed with lanterns and flashlights, spread out in all directions, calling the children's names. The sound of their voices, filled with desperation, pierced the night. They searched the woods, the fields, and every nook and cranny of the town, hoping to find some trace of the missing children. Lanterns and flashlights cut through the night, illuminating the frantic search for the missing children. The search continued through the night with no sign of the children. The town, once a place of peace and tranquility, was now shrouded in fear and uncertainty. The mystery of the vanishing on Harmony Road had begun, and it would haunt the town for years to come. The families of the missing children were thrust into a nightmare. Their lives, once filled with the mundane routines and simple pleasures of small-town existence, were now overshadowed by an unrelenting darkness. Each day felt like an eternity, each night a relentless torment of unanswered questions and unfulfilled hopes. The Millers, the Campbells, and the Carters, once bound by the simple joys of small-town life, were now united by a shared, unbearable grief. Their bonds, once formed over community gatherings and shared celebrations, were now forged in the crucible. The weight of their loss was a constant presence, an invisible shroud that hung over them, altering the very fabric of their existence. Their homes, once filled with the joyful chaos of childhood, were now heavy with silence, each tick of the clock a painful reminder of their absence. The once vibrant walls, adorned with children's drawings and family photos, now seemed to echo with the ghosts of laughter and play. Every corner of their homes held memories, now tinged with a bittersweet longing for what once was. "I just want to hear their voices again," sobbed Mrs. Miller, her voice hoarse with days of crying, clutching a faded photograph of Sam and Lily close to her chest. The photograph, once a cherished keepsake, had become a symbol of her anguish, a tangible connection to her missing children. Her days were now spent in a haze of grief, her nights filled with dreams that quickly turned into nightmares, their laughter, their fights, anything but this silence. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder of the void that had been left behind. The sounds of their playful arguments, their giggles, and even their cries were now precious memories that Mrs. Miller clung to, hoping against hope that she would hear them again. The Campbells, their faces etched with exhaustion and despair, clung to each other for support. Their once lively home was now a place of mourning, each family member struggling to find solace in the midst of their shared pain. The strength they drew from each other was the only thing keeping them from being completely consumed by their grief. "They were just playing in the woods," whispered Mr. Campbell, his voice trembling. The woods, once a place of adventure and exploration for the children, had now become a source of dread and fear for the parents. The memories of their children's laughter echoing through the trees were now overshadowed by the haunting silence that had taken its place. They knew better than to go too far. The children had always been cautious, aware of the boundaries set by their parents, but now those boundaries seemed meaningless, the safety they once provided shattered by the cruel reality of their disappearance. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been sown. What if they had missed something? What if there was a clue, a sign that they had overlooked? The questions gnawed at them, adding to the torment of their already shattered hearts. The woods held an unsettling quiet, a silence that spoke volumes. The once familiar paths and clearings now seemed ominous, each shadow hiding a potential threat. The parents could no longer look at the forest without feeling a chill of fear and a pang of sorrow. Emily Carter's parents, their faces pale and drawn, seemed to age overnight. The stress and heartache had taken a visible toll on them, their once vibrant faces now marked by lines of worry and sorrow. The weight of their loss was a burden they carried with them every moment of every day. She was such a quiet child, Emily's mother shared, her voice a mere whisper. Her words were filled with a deep sense of longing and regret, each syllable a testament to the love she had for her daughter. Emily had always been a gentle soul, content to lose herself in the pages of her favorite books, always reading, always lost in her own world. The books had been her escape, her sanctuary. Now they were a painful reminder of the daughter who had been taken from them. Each book on the shelf was a memory, each page a fragment of the life they had lost. She clutched Emily's favorite, worn thin from countless readings, as if it were a lifeline to her missing daughter. The book, once a source of joy, was now a symbol of her grief, a connection to the child she desperately hoped to see again. The disappearance of the children had ripped a hole in the very fabric of their families, leaving behind a raw, gaping wound that refused to heal. The pain was a constant presence, a shadow that loomed over every aspect of their lives. The families struggled to find a sense of normalcy, but the absence of their children was a void that could never be filled. Their pain was palpable, their grief echoing through the community, amplifying the collective sense of loss and helplessness. The entire town felt the impact of the children's disappearance, each resident sharing in the sorrow and uncertainty. The community came together in their grief, offering support and solace to one another, but the sense of loss was a wound that time alone could not heal.